Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships. Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm your host, John Johnson. And this particular podcast, I'm going to talk about, will your relationship survive the test of time? And it's around the idea that there are things that successful relationships seem to have. And if your relationship has a few of these, it's likely that it's at least on the right track. And some of the things that we like to do is we like to know, we compare ourselves to relationships that seem to fall apart. What are the things that happen in relationships when they're deteriorating that lets us know that there's a warning sign? Because it doesn't automatically translate that if you have an upset, you have an argument with your partner, that means that things are bad. That's just human nature. But there are things that happen in relationships that when they continue to happen, it is a sign that it's not going to survive. And you can either pull the plug on it, or decide that you're going to do something about making some changes so that you can survive the test of time. Relationships are about providing a safe place. It's about providing security. They're a mutual safety, security. And when those things are absent, then you have to wonder, what's the purpose of the relationship? What shelter does it provide? You see, these are the kinds of things that we all crave as human beings, some sort of safety net. And it is in our relationships, it's in the partners that we choose that help make those things happen. And over time, if we see that things are not going the direction that we want, let's say because of how we feel, now that isn't always an indicator that things are bad. And I realize feelings oftentimes drives us to act. But sometimes we feel a certain way because of how we perceive things. And sometimes we project things onto other people. And we have to learn those distinctions. And successful relationships that survive the test of time, the partners are constantly learning about themselves, because relationships will definitely provide an opportunity for you to learn, not only about your partner, but about yourself. Because it is really in the interaction with other people that we can learn these things. We oftentimes can learn things on our own, but it is in the experience of being in a relationship with someone that we can learn things about ourselves, because we can't always operate in a vacuum, though we'd like to sometimes. But I'm going to get into the topic by talking about one of the things that I know good relationships have is they have an avenue for communication. Now, that's not just talk, but it is a way of communicating. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's nonverbal, but it gives the partners a vehicle for sharing back and forth. And a lot of times when we use the word communication, sometimes or at least even in my own self, when I'm speaking about it in this podcast, I'm talking about problem solving. So it is an opportunity for you to be able to vent with your partner and to say what you have to say. So there is that aspect, but there's also the part about the communication, which is positive, which is uplifting. And that is very important to the self-esteem, to the esteem of the relationship itself and the partners, those who are participating in it, because by giving it those positive strokes, it also solidifies why you and your partner are together. Because it is not always about bad news. Well, you do have to have the vehicle for talking about those difficult things. But it's also important to remember to be positive and to bring light and fun and enjoyment into your relationship. Because as a partner, that's one of the things that you lean on your co-partner to do, is to bring goodness, to bring joy. And it's important that you remember to do that as well. And it's not always something that you are going to be prompted to do. So you have to remember this piece internally. Remember to bring love and joy to your partner. It could be a challenge, and sometimes things grow stale. And you may even have the perception that it seems like, I do this all the time. Well, remember how I was sharing about the communication part. If you feel like you are burdened with something of that nature in the relationship, remember, you have that communication, you have that ability to share those things with your partner to kind of set the thing right on track. And here's something to remember when it comes to communication. If you're the listener of something like that, and as much as we always like to hear the good stuff, if we're in the place of hearing the things that are difficult, remember you are listening to someone's feelings. That doesn't mean that they are true, and I say that with air quotes. It just means that sometimes your partner needs to be able to vent. And by having that, in your relationship, that is something that will help you survive the test of time. Because there is, and understand this, there's always a reciprocal arrangement, meaning you have it, your partner has it. If you benefit from it, find a way for your partner to benefit from it, because it keeps you together, it makes you two a team. Now, going on from there, and I had shared something about being able to share positive strokes, and that's always important. The positive strokes can happen lots of ways. It could be words of kindness. It could be a small gift or a large gift, whatever is in your capacity to do. And as you talk about other things in life, reconnecting about some of your beliefs. And I find that relationships that survive the test of time, the belief systems are between the partners are very similar. I think having a really strong spiritual connection with each other, foundation, those kinds of things really help survive the test of time. Because oftentimes having a spiritual connection itself serves as a really nice backdrop. So if there is some sort of, and I'll borrow it this way, if there's a sort of disagreement, if you have a spiritual connection, sometimes you can use that as an anchor, and you can go back to that as a reference to say, maybe we can borrow from our spirituality to help solve our problems. And from that, it helps to diffuse something of a disagreement. And by spiritual connections, let's say if you happen to be someone who's very Christian based and you use a Bible as your foundation, as you read from the scriptures, then you can borrow from the knowledge there and then compare how you feel, what you're thinking, and use that as a focal point. So there's an example of having a spiritual connection. Whether it's Christian, whether it's Judaism, or any of the other spiritual teachings out there, having that sort of foundation will help your relationship survive the test of time. Because by having something other than ourselves as being the boss, it allows us to be humbled at times and to realize the value of our partner if we happen to, say, get bigger than our britches, as my father would be one to say, and to learn that everything isn't about you. And I think something about spirituality teaches us that it is not always about you. And when you learn that and share that with your partner, that when your partner is important, then you learn to make each other a priority, not an option, but a priority. And that's something that will help relationships survive the test of time. I'm going to take a short break, and I will be back and we'll talk about this a little bit more. Stay tuned.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hi there, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts, the Relationships Podcast. And I'm John Johnson, talking about the subject of, will your relationship survive the test of time? Something that I find that's really important in relationship longevity is quality time together. You can't overestimate the importance of that, because in that quality time, you are creating important memories. You're creating a bond between two people so that they have something to fall back on. Relationships ebb and they flow, good times and bad. And it's in the times when things are difficult, you want to be able to have something to fall back on. And that's sort of that reservoir, that bank account, if you will, of good things that you've invested in. And that would be each other. And quality time amounts to that. And it can be the smallest thing. It could be sharing the reading of a book together. It could be taking a walk together. But it is the kind of thing in which each of the members feels that they are bonding, that they feel like they are the focus of each other's attention and affection. And it's in moments like this that you feel special. And it's important to feel special in your relationship with your partner. We have all kinds of things that we feel good about, and those things can be individual in nature. We might feel good about the clothes that we wear. We might feel really good about the car that we drive, the job that we have, all of these kinds of things. But it's when we bond with those things, that carries with it a good memory for us. And I'm talking, I use that as an analogy. So I'm talking about the human connection here, bonding with your partner, and the value that quality time provides is there's times for thought, there's the being at peace with each other. And here's another interesting thing. When you are with your partner in quality time, it could be conversational. Absolutely. And you start associating with the things that brought you together, whether it's the political point of view, whether it's a religious, spiritual point of view, conversations about the kids. I mean, these things are fairly similar in what may have brought you together in the first place. So it's sort of reconnecting. When you think about it, when you have your anniversary, what's significant about that is it's an opportunity to have a reconnection of sorts. So I'm suggesting that you don't have to wait for the anniversary date to have a reconnection. It's kind of what date night is about. Again, about focusing on each other. And the normal day-to-day distractions in life, you sort of push those things away. And again, focusing on each other, this is how your relationship will develop the capacity to withstand the test of time. Because again, this is where the investment into that relationship bank account allows you to draw from. And I often wonder, at least between partners, think about this. Now, you think about this yourself individually. How often in your day do you think about your significant other? And I offer that as an idea, as a suggestion that when you've bonded with your partner, when you think about your significant other, hopefully it gives you a lift. It's something that you look forward to. And, these things do not require you to be tied at the hip. Many of us are very individualistic in how we operate. We have responsibilities and we can compartmentalize. I'm a guy, so a lot of times I can compartmentalize the way I operate throughout my day so that I can stay focused. And then when I've completed that task, I reconnect with the thought of my partner. And there's ways that you can kind of jumpstart that thought. Some people have photographs on their desk of their partner, if you happen to have a desk, or maybe on your cell phone. It can be part of the phone wallpaper that has a picture. And, these kinds of things can help give you a jump start in thinking of your partner. So that's some of the small ways in which you can jumpstart your partner. But these are the kinds of things that help you survive the test of time when you have the good feelings and keep them going. One of the things that you want to take into consideration is how you problem solve. Now, I talk about communication all the time, and that's just natural. We have to learn how to get better at it. We have to learn not to be so agitated and be reactive. These are all things we have to learn, especially if we've not learned them from the people that have been around us. But when it comes to problem solving, because all relationships will have difficult times, it is, how do you communicate to your partner? It's one thing to be in a good space and to smile and laugh and chuckle and everything. But like I say, when you get to the problem part of it, it's how you solve problems is what's going to really help determine if you can survive the test of time. Some people are too focused on themselves, and by that, meaning they only worry about their own feelings instead of thinking about what is really to gain by berating your partner and putting your partner down. I would say very little. If at worst, all you get is a person who's passive aggressive, that's not good, because it's really in being able to communicate in an open fashion and to have both people feel that they're cared about is what helps. At worst, you will no longer have that partner, because that's going to shortchange all of your goodwill, all your good intentions, by being a real difficult person to communicate with during those times. So when it comes to problem solving, we have to learn how to be a good listener, how to word things in a way that don't put people off or make people feel demeaned or embarrassed, and really think of it in terms of how would you want to be approached. And if you need help with that, there are several books out there that talk about how to problem solve, how to deal with conflict. And sometimes the reason we handle things the way we do is because it was modeled for us as children in that way. Sometimes it's very loud, very argumentative, very confrontational. But I think we learn as we get older that those kinds of things don't necessarily work in the everyday world. Because what those styles do is they create resentment amongst the people, amongst the individuals involved. So if it's just somebody out there in the world and you have a confrontation with, then you might share a few words, you go apart, you can calm down, maybe approach it another day. Maybe you will never see that person again. But if it's your partner in your relationship, you can't expect to have those kind of adversarial flare-ups and it to last very long. So those are definitely not ways in which to handle a conflict. One of the ways that I like to suggest that people do it is they write down what they are upset about. That way, when the time comes to having a discussion about it, you can at least say things in a way that you can be heard. Not in a yelling fashion, but in a way that's very calm and where you can explain yourselves and that questions can be asked. That tends to work a lot better. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that aspect right after this. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hi there, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. When I left off, I was talking about how one can do a little bit of the problem solving, and it was the writing things down so that your thoughts can be collected. Some people are very good at writing. Some write in diaries. Some have other types of journaling. And what I find that you need to do a little problem solving with your partner. It's good to write things down. It's good to write down what you're feeling and write down what you think the problem is. Because sometimes it is just the idea of getting things out of your head and on paper allows you to see something of a pattern. So as you're writing down the things, look for something that is similar in what you're writing. Similar in idea, similar in cause. Because with that, it may be one thing that could cover a number of these and the problem goes away. If it's several things, sometimes then we have to break these things down. But I'm talking about the art of problem solving when you're in a relationship and you're a couple. Therapists do this all the time, and they are good at spotting the commonality, the common themes in the miscommunications. So if you're writing things down, and I always encourage people to do that. So if you're writing things down and you're seeing something that's similar, what I'm getting at is when we find the common theme here, we can both work towards that. And you may both find that you have the same concern. Therefore, you will both be able to resolve something within the relationship and have it taken care of. But it's a good habit to solve things this way. And as I explained, when you are then in a place of sharing what you've written down, you can say it in a way that it can be heard, because we know very well that when we say things in a fashion that sounds very aggressive, very agitated, very angry, very loud, you're not going to be heard. I mean, people are going to hear the words, but the meaning is going to come out all distorted. And that's not very fun when you feel like you're being attacked. And then you're going to have somebody ask something of you when you're being attacked. That doesn't feel very good. Even when the person is saying it that, you love, that's still a hard place to be. So when we sort of take the intensity out of some of this, the anger, the intensity out of this, it's much easier to want to concede and give to your partner what they want. Because sometimes that giving is an inconvenience. Sometimes it's a challenge. It's difficult, and it may take a few times through that in order to get it right. So we may not be perfect at it, but I like to say as long as it's going the right direction, we're making progress. So that's important when it comes to the problem solving thing, and that is going to help you have a relationship that will survive the test of time. And you learn to build on these positive things. And that's so important. And I think another thing that a good relationship does is that you celebrate your victories. You celebrate the small victories that happen in life with your partner, whatever successes they have. If they were taking classes and they finished a semester, you go out and celebrate. Or even smaller, if they took a test last week and they passed the test, go out and celebrate. We're not going to all win the lottery or big things like that. And as long as you're not waiting for something like that to happen, you probably have a lot of things in your life that you can really learn to pat yourself on the back for. And when you do that and you share those kinds of moments, you wind up being in each other's corner. You wind up being a support person for each other. And you learn that that is an important part of intimacy as much as kissing, as much as intercourse, as much as so many of the other things that we seem to automatically think of when we talk about intimacy. The sharing of those victories, however big or small, and like I say, you have more small victories which lead up to a great outcome. And I've always felt that the people that you are willing to share those moments with are the ones who are important to you in life. And that's something to think about. When somebody is sharing those moments with you, you are significant. You are important in their life. And embrace that. And I believe it's very nice to acknowledge those things. Putting words to those are also the kinds of things that help build great memories. Because time is the one thing that we have that we can share, that we should all appreciate when somebody shares theirs with us. Because you can't get it back. So that really does make it precious. Something else I'd like to emphasize, and it is this. Sometimes we find ourselves wanting to compare our relationship to someone else's. You know, it's nice to look at another couple and to see how well things seem to work. And I'm not going to throw any shade on that. But what I want us to learn to be able to do as individuals is really to look within yourself. This is where one of those times in, when you're learning to not necessarily compare yourself to other people, but learning how to look at yourself and the progress that you've made. Now take that same idea and put it within your relationship and look at the growth that you have been able to amass. And I hope that it's growing the right direction. It's moving forward. And with that, learn to celebrate those kinds of things. Because understand, you're not in competition with the other couple across the way. When it comes to the relationship and the challenges that you have, it's really, really difficult to look at somebody across the way and know what they are going through. But to know that they have gone through things and have a united front, that they're a good team, that they're good partners for each other, that's something that you can learn to do in your relationship as well. And you can learn to stand the test of time. And as much as we learn to look at other relationships and they go through their anniversaries and learn to celebrate each other and those kinds of things that I talked about before in this podcast, you learn to do those things and you will also have something that will be worth admiring. You can appreciate it yourself, and I applaud you for looking at your partner and being able to give the best that you have and inspiring your partner to do the same thing. There, you can depend on each other. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast. Will your relationship survive the test of time? Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.